describe in detail the first time, what it was like to meet this being for the first time?
My original feeling was I was looking at a giant insect. It's the best I can just off the cuff. It looked like a giant insect, being dark brown and hunched in a corner, very insectoid in appearance. It almost looked like it had an exoskeleton. I felt afraid inside because I was always told that monsters weren't real. And now I find out they are, but they live in the heart of men. It was fear, excitement, complete astonishment. Because honestly, I thought we were dealing with some sort of monkey. Something like an old world ape or the like, but indeed it wasn't. That's what my feeling was. This, I'm not going to lay on and talk about how intellectual I was at the time about it. It scared the hell out of me.
Welcome back to the Night Shift. I don't know if you've been keeping up with current events, but if you haven't, there's some interesting news. Looks like the movement towards disclosure is picking up steam again, gaining momentum after a little bit of a lull. There's some new movement in Congress for a revised disclosure amendment. Looks like Danny Sheehan is involved. And there's an honest push to get a question about disclosure introduced into the presidential debates by CNN. And this is something that the New Paradigm Institute is working on. If you want to find out more, visit their website and look at the email that just went out from Danny Sheehan talking about this. It's a really exciting opportunity for us to bring this into the mainstream and finally put this issue on the radar for so many people out there who don't know it's a real issue yet. So we're reaching out to CNN and just as a community trying to push them to get involved and mention disclosure. Ask the presidential candidates about this and let's put them on the spot and see what they have to say. Do they try to dodge the bullet, change the subject with some kind of a silly joke and a aside, or do they tackle it head on and do they actually have answers? They should. So this is something that we really want to see happen, and I encourage you to visit New Paradigm Institute's website to learn more. But that's not the spiciest meatball I've got for you today. I've been thinking about some new ways to expand the content on the channel, and today what I want to do is something that I've been kind of eager to do for a while, but I've held off on it. And I want to reach into the vault, pull out some old videos, and I want to watch them with you and get your reaction to some of the stuff that I find really fascinating. And today's video is an interview with a guy named Dan Burisch. I think I'm saying that right. Dan Burisch or Bueller? Dan Burisch was a biologist, supposedly, who worked at S4 and actually worked on taking biological samples from one of the EBEs, or one of the biologics that we have in a very specialized facility at that location. And what's really interesting about this interview is that Dan, look, so much of what we are left to do is speculate in this space. I mean, in the absence of any real concrete, accurate, rock solid information, we are left to kind of speculate on the second and third hand stories that we get from people who claim to have been involved in this program. And Dan Burisch is one of those guys. But I got to tell you, the first time I watched this interview with him and observed his body language, I just can't shake the feeling that what he's saying is accurate and actually happened. It's a total gut instinct reaction. I don't have anything else to base this on, but I really want you to see this interview because it's spectacular.
What we did is introduce the new members, myself amongst them, into the clean sphere area, and we were eventually shown the subject for which we were examining the slides. The slides were unusual in that they were in pressurized cells, and they were reviewed by us on a conveyor with a completely automatic microscope. We weren't touching anything. We'd give verbal commands. At the second instance, we were finally allowed to have a VRML like keyboard for examining the slides, and I digressed, but then working with the J-Rod itself in the ambassadorial suite or the Clean Sphere suite.
Now, was this under...
Sometimes you'll see an interview with someone who's seen a UFO or encountered a being or a non-human intelligence, and you can just tell. You can just tell that they're not making this up. You just know it in your bones. This is one of those interviews.
He showed me concurrently not only the equations for the rule of nines, but he also did so diagrammatically, and he did so with three-dimensional, like a VRML system, where I was watching cubes come together. So that if I was not understanding, apparently if I was not understanding the script, I would understand it as a child learns group theory in mathematics. Highly evolved, highly intellectual, highly repressed emotionally. When I was with him, I felt great happiness to be with him, but I could feel his great sadness, not only because of what he wanted to become, what he knew he was by being present with us, but where he was and how he was being treated. He was not part of the group that has to be catered to involving the T9 treaty that was just signed. He wanted to help. He was willing. When I went in, for God's sakes, I took well over, nearly 300 individualized aspiration samples from his neurological system. He would hold his arm out for me to take them.
Now, maybe I just missed something. Maybe I'm super gullible and one of you out there has more perception points than I do. Please let me know. But we're going to watch this video. I'm going to give you my thoughts, and I really want to know what you all think. So what's fascinating about this story isn't just his body language, the eye contact, but it's the details, the little details. He talks about the facility. He talks about the room he was in. He talks about where things are in the room, very specifically, how many feet the gantry way is to walk up. How do they go into the facility where this being is stored? What kind of protective measures do they take to keep themselves from being contaminated or from contaminating the being? All these little individual tiny details that when you hear them woven together in this amazing story, one can't help but walk away with the impression that this is an actual place. There are actual people working there, and this guy was there and did the things that he's claiming to have done. It's a fascinating story. It's really about an hour and a half long, but with the commentary, it kind of stretches out to just over 2.5 hours. So feel free to digest this in bite-sized chunks. But I encourage you, if you can, to watch the whole thing all the way through, because it is just astonishing. Thanks for watching. If you're not already a subscriber, please hit that button, subscribe, become a member of Team Night Shift. We're going to be trying all kinds of new things here over the next few weeks, and I'm so excited. We're about to creep up on that 5,000 subscriber number, and I would really love to cross that threshold in the next couple of days. So help me cross that number. Help me get to 5,000 subscribers. You'll be doing yourself and the people of Earth a gigantic favor, and you'll be doing a huge favor for me. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and share this video. Now let's get to it.
And there's only 10 questions here. It looks like one was added, but I'm just going to let you talk, whatever you want to talk about freely. I'm just going to ask you the first question and we'll continue.
Yeah, I just prefer it be more of a conversation rather than a. The other makes me feel as though I'm testifying, and I'm prepared to do that as well.
Okay, raise your right hand and put your left hand on the Bible here. Or was it your right hand that's supposed to be?
And as long as we're in a closed session, so help me God.
Yeah, conversation is definitely the way to go.
Yeah, I'm working on that subpoena. I talked to Big Time Attorney, and we're talking different things, and we can discuss that at a different time. So.
Yeah, he's a great guy too. He's a good guy. He's experienced at high level.
As I was saying to Bill on the way over here, I was ordered to present a copy of my order to meet him at St. Mark's Square. That order contains an initial of a committee member, a coded initial of a committee member. From what I understand, there's currently a 17-16 split. This is mostly rumor around the community to forward a public acclamation program having to do with the Majestic 12 and the overseeing committee, the old 5412, which is now basically called the Committee of the Majority, as far as I'm told.
The questions are just to give us a little structure.
Well, that's fine.
Okay.
That's fine.
Well, that's interesting news. And if I say something or one of us says something, just answer, talk to me.
That's fine.
Keep going between you and Bill.
The lights are cumbersome, but
A little much? Okay.
that's fine.
All right.
That's fine. That's fine. If you look closely, they're nice and red from looking through the scope all last night, so they can't get much worse.
Oh, okay. Okay, the first question, Dan, they want to know is, where did you work in the mid-90s, and how did you come to be employed there?
Well, several locations in the mid-90s. I had some cover positions here in Las Vegas, which made me look like a good old-fashioned Joe. In fact, I had some police experience at the late 80s. You're probably centering your question around the work for the government. In 1986, I was approached while working as an undergraduate student in Dr. Bert Bell Barbero's office, in his parasitology laboratory, to be exact. I was looking through a scope at the time. Three gentlemen walked into the laboratory, closed the door behind them. There was 2 uniforms and a suit that were present. Both of the uniforms I would make as most probably being United States Navy. My memory of that one event's kind of hazy after seeing all of the suits and uniforms and whatnot. We spoke for a while. They asked me if I was interested in seeing the world and the like. I told them I in fact was. We went through several interview processes, not unlike this, and reviewed my background. I went through several background investigations. Finally, starting up 90-91 time frame, I was cleared for working past groom to the Papoose mountain facility, that place that doesn't exist, about 90 miles north of here, the nowhere place. That's how I came to work there. My original assignment was at the Groom Lake facility to review histopathology slides. And I went through nearly a year's testing and then was basically let loose for a year, and I heard no contact from them. After that, I was brought back in and shown some higher grade slides of unknown origin. Following that, I was introduced into a working group and subsequently brought into the Papoose facility, the Site 4 facility. We worked for well over a year on slides of unknown origin. After I took a minimum leadership position under several of the other biologists who were already present, most of which are now deceased. You know the names of those individuals. I was then introduced into the level 4-5 facility, and the 4-5 coded for 9. You're again aware, we covered this in ancient history. And so what we did is introduce the new members, myself amongst them, into the clean sphere area, and we were eventually shown the subject for which we were examining the slides.
This sounds really, really captivating because of the level of nuance and detail that he brings to this story. And it seems, I don't know if it's true, but it feels true because the way that he's describing what's going on, this gradual process of being slowly brought in to the program, bit by bit, as they decide that he's trustworthy and they can work with him. This is really interesting stuff.
Slides were unusual in that they were in pressurized cells, and they were reviewed by us on a conveyor with a completely automatic microscope. We weren't touching anything. We'd give verbal commands. At the second instance, we were finally allowed to have a VRML, like keyboard, for examining the slides, and I digressed. But then working with the J-Rod.
Did he say pressure sealed slides a minute ago? Pressure sealed, as in like the biological samples that contained in these slides would degrade or deteriorate based on the amount of pressure or ambient pressure in the environment. So like the pressure has to be constant in order for it to stay stable. I don't know what that actually means, but I mean, I think I know what it means, but I'm not sure exactly what he's getting at, but that's a really interesting detail.
Itself in the ambassadorial suite or the CleanSphere suite.
Now, was this under this Project Aquarius?
Yes, yes. Initially, I was assigned as a working member of Project Aquarius. Then finally, I was made an assistant working group leader. And then mysteriously, after one meeting with the J-Rod, I was asked to take the working group leader position. I didn't find out why I was asked to take the working group leader position until, well, within this last year. I never understood it because Stephen was older than I. He was my senior not only in ability, but in age. And I would have never figured being advanced above an individual like that in ranking within a working group. And in fact, I never considered myself above him. We worked together. The Q94 document that you have in your possession was co-authored. My name went on there as the primary investigator because I was the working group leader. But in fact, he and I were both involved in the authoring of that document.
Oh. Okay. Now, could you explain briefly what you were briefed on who and or what J-Rod was?
Initially, I was briefed that J-Rod was an alien, specifically from the Reticulum system to Reticulum 4. I had no idea the truth. Yes, from 2 Reticulum 4 now, but I had no idea the truth of how they came to be.
Is that the same as the system that Betty Hill referred to in her abduction experience with Barney Hill? Wasn't it? Was it Zeta Reticuli? There's an interesting backstory to Betty and Barney Hill's, well, not backstory, but there's an interesting aspect to Betty and Barney Hill's story where Betty Hill describes a star system, a star map that she supposedly saw while she was on board the craft, which was later recreated. At the time she described it, no one was aware of what it was. And it just didn't appear on any of our star maps. And it wasn't discovered until later when an astronomer, I'm not sure what her name is, but somebody put together a model in a room where they actually hung like little model planets and stars and basically created a 3-dimensional model back in the whatever year this was. And they were from that, they were able to sort of back into what the star system was. And they figured out that it was an actual star system. I wonder if that's what he's referring to here, or if this is just a different thing. I'm no expert, so.
As I said to you before, I have never met an alien, but I have met an extraterrestrial.
That's weird.
I found out subsequent to interactions with the J-Rod. And again, they have personal names. The term J-Rod simply means 15, which was a basing name for where they're located, the number of light years from our location. So they took those names. And they identified through the Sigma protocols, the linguistic protocols, with a rod symbol, which was an inertia symbol, and the letter J. And in fact, that was a combination of Mayan and Egyptian numerology having to do with a rod and a J, meaning 10 and 5 for 15.
That's really, really weird. So the linguistic protocols, he's talking about linguistic protocols. That's an interesting detail. And they had some form of communication worked out to sort of figure out how to begin talking to this being.
Okay. Now, 15 light years away, is that the police 876?
876 Charlie, from what I've been told. Now, he did not specifically tell me that that was the location, but the number 15 was mentioned.
Well,
They don't call it, apparently, Police 876, whatever,
how
Charlie.
did J-Rod get here? I mean, how did he, 15 light years away?
He crashed in 63, from what I understand,
Oh, was that right?
outside of Kingman,
Okay,
Arizona.
right.
There was a problem involving his physiology and his biophysiological communication with the craft went wrong. And of course, he's ill, as we know, with the MGUS and the paraprotein associated problems.
That we hear that again and again. The biological, like the way that these beings interact with the craft, involves linking physically to the craft in some way, and then somehow being able to tie their consciousness to the craft. I've heard it described as the pilot becomes the craft becomes an extension of the pilot, and they become one organism. And I think there's something there. I've heard that enough times from enough different sources that it seems like there's some kind of a there. Another way that I've read that this works, and this is purely speculative based on something I read on the internet, but it sounded really compelling, was that the craft acts as sort of some kind of a quantum computer that binds with your consciousness, or the consciousness of the operator. And the operator's consciousness then can travel with the craft independently of the body. I don't know which one of these is more or less accurate, but it sounds like that's what he's describing here. Something like that. The pilot has a physical connection to the craft that allows them to join with it, which makes sense. I mean, for a craft that has to perform at these unbelievable speeds and do the things that they're supposedly capable of doing, the latency time between thinking something and it actually happening would be next to zero. So it would have to be really reduced as much as possible. And the best way to do that would be to become one with the craft. I wonder also, like, what would that do to your experience of time? As the pilot is operating the craft, does time relative to the people outside of the craft appear to slow down for the pilot so that everyone else appears to be moving in slow motion and they can just sort of bounce around and do whatever it is they need to do? And what there's people on the outside of the craft are actually seeing are these impossible maneuvers that look like they're moving at 10,000 miles an hour.
And he crashed.
And how was he transported immediately from that crash site to the S4 facility? And how is
That I don't know.
Okay.
That I don't know.
You don't know how he came to be at the facility? in
I,
the
be-
first place?
I believe he and associates were transferred separately. He to the originally to the Groom Lake facility, and an associate to, I believe, Los Alamos.
Los Alamos.
I have no independent verification of where the associate went, though. All I can say is that he was there at Site 4.
Now, you interacted with J-Rod. Was there a general procedure for this interaction?
Well, there was not a general procedure. There was a very specific procedure.
Very specific, okay?
After we would be brought in with our helper biologists, there was controlling helper biologists, those in the gallery, and then the introduction specialist, which was myself on a number of occasions. We entered the clean sphere through a large series of protocols involving pressurization and compartmentalization, no pun intended, until finally we were pressurized and fully encapsulated a TEC, a TES, total encapsulated suit for entrance into the clean sphere. Once we were pressurized and entered into the clean sphere, well, I should digress. We had a medical evaluation, all of that first. But they ceased doing that after a couple of medical evaluations. It was more just interested, let's get you in and get the work done. I would enter into the clean sphere, and I was not supposed to communicate with the J-Rod at all.
that process, like what he's describing, sounds weirdly correct. As someone who is not myself a biologist and has no idea what this process would be like, other than what I've seen in movies, it seems to make a lot more sense than some of the other alien interview things that I've seen. I don't know how much how familiar you are with some of the other alien autopsy, alien interview things that are out there, but a lot of them look really slapshot and sort of thrown together and fake. And there's one that everybody is kind of on the fence about that many people believe is just a puppet. It's the Victor alien interview where the alien is supposedly, or the EBE, is in a darkened room and you can see their head moving, and then there's a shot where two medical medics come in and attend to the being. And something about it looks very convincing and real, but I can also see the argument that it's very puppet-like, and it definitely would be possible to fake something like that. But looking at his eyes and watching his body language as he describes the procedure, and the procedure makes it definitely sounds like a legitimate procedure. Like you would go through a medical examination, get checked out, you would go through a series of steps, you would put on a pressurized suit, you would go into what he's referring to as a clean sphere. This would be, if you think about it, if you were going to be working one-on-one on or with or alongside an alien or an EBE or an extraterrestrial, whatever you want to call it, to protect them from us and to protect us from them, there would be like enormous attention paid to the biological risks of infection or contamination, especially if, I think, as we're going to find out later, this being is injured or suffering from some kind of a genetic disorder. So this makes a lot of sense to me. It sounds very legit. What do you guys think?
I was not supposed to know his name. The reality is we were communicating from the time that I entered into the ambassadorial suite external to the clean sphere, talking back and forth freely. I could hear whatever he was projecting at me from thought, and he could very clearly hear what I was thinking. I say hear, meaning perceive. I was supposed to stand over by a hologram projection system, which was run as like a teleprompter system over to my right that would be run inside of the clean sphere glass. Hold my hand up and mimic certain signs. And it became a joke. It really did. It became a joke. Those folks who were watching from the gallery running the show thought that I was standing there and mimicking the signs, and this was the only communication underway.
He's describing this gallery like the I don't know how many of you watch Stargate, but like in the Stargate movie or TV series, there's the room where the Stargate is located, and then in the back of the room up high, there's like this viewing gallery where politicians and military people stand and they watch these teams go in and out from the Stargate missions. And that sounds like what he's describing here. Like there's a clean sphere, a pressurized environment where this alien or extraterrestrial is, and then the biologists that go in to work with them have to suit up, go through this whole medical procedure, suit up, go in, plug in on the inside of this sphere, and then outside of that there's a viewing gallery where people can come, I guess MJ12 people can come watch. It's really fascinating description, the level of detail.
They perceived on the day that the approach, the close approach that he made, the grabbing incident that he did with me, they perceived that there was a communication that occurred. So I began getting questioned quite extensively whether or not he in fact was communicating with me, because he had promised not to, apparently, with the Sigma unit. I alluded to the fact that there was conversation.
The Sigma unit, is that like the communications unit? Would that be like a specialized team that's involved with communication with the being?
Underway, but I didn't talk about what it was until, of course, I was caught in my research protocol forwarding ideas that were somewhat different than what they expected, where they expected my private research was going to go, and this is much later. And at that time, the deal was brokered to find out about the doctrine for the convergent timeline paradox. I told.
Wait, what? Did you just hear that? Convergent timeline paradox? Go on. I'm listening.
Told them a little bit about what he showed me, a little bit, and they told me a little bit about the DCTP.
The DCTP. You had me at divergent timeline paradox.
Now that you brought that up, which implies travel through time as well
Yes.
as space, and you said that
So there we are. We're hearing this now. Time travel. Remember how like you hear this a lot lately. Like this has been coming up again and again in the conversation. Maybe they're us from the future. Maybe they're time travelers. This video was recorded in the early 90s, like what, 94, 95? That's an interesting detail.
J-Rod was retrieved from a crash near Kingman. Was he at that time just traveling through space from the staging area, or?
Yes.
No? Yeah, okay.
Yes.
He wasn't doing any time traveling at that point?
No, not as far as I'm aware.
Okay.
Not as far as he told me, no.
Can you describe J-Rod to us, what he looked like and how he behaved?
Yes. The
Great question. No one ever asks these questions. Like that's such a great question. Describe J-Rod. How did he look? How did he behave?
the gentleman with which I was associated was approximately 3.5 feet tall. He had a dark brown appearance, very ruddy appearance to his skin. He was in a highly pressurized clean sphere. He exuded glycoprotein-like material through pores on his skin, which was associated with the neuritis, the neuropathy that with which we were dealing.
Did this have an odor to it?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know.
Great
I
question.
couldn't
Did it
perceive
have
any
an
odors whatsoever. I was inside.
odor?
But,
Look at his eyes.
I would imagine. But I have no data set to say what it would have smelled like. And in fact, there was nothing I read that indicated whether or not there was an odor. Why? I'm wondering. You've asked that before, and that's why I'm wondering.
Well, yeah, I've heard about this secretion coming through the pores of the skin before,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mhm.
there have been those who've had encounters who say they can smell an odor
Okay.
from the skin.
All right. Where were we?
You were describing.
3.5 feet, large head in comparison to torso. So the ratio of the cranial to the torso area would be larger than in what we would call a modern human being. Large, bulbous black eyes. The whites of the eyes had been selected out. So it looked like a large pupil, basically. When you look into his eyes, you feel like you're going to fall into his eyes forever. And I think that probably had something to do with the telepathic nature.
That's been described by a number of people in John Mack's book, Abduction, Bud Hopkins' work. A lot of abduction and encounters reports talk about how weird it is to look these things in the eye, and that when you look them in the eye, it's like you become transfixed and almost hypnotized just by looking in their eyes. And there are actually reports from abductees who say that they're terrified to look them in the eye. That when they look in their eyes, that they feel like that the beings can see everything there is to know about them, and they're just completely helpless against that. It's a very intriguing detail that comes up again and again and again. Always tied back to the telepathy aspect. I find that fascinating.
Of his mental structure. Large arms, large length. 4 very thin, sinuous fingers. Nails, not as long as presented in some of the images that you've showed me in the past. The ones done by Tom Mack, was it? By Tom?
Bill Ugas.
Oh, yeah, that's it, the Puppet Master photos. I'm smiling because the Puppet Master leads me to other nicknames. But
Puppet Master, are they talking about the Victor interview?
he was hunched over most of the time, could not support himself fully given muscular atrophy. And that had to do with the peripheral neuropathy under which he was suffering. So he would grunt and move toward me almost in a flopping fashion. Feet were large in comparison to what we would, say our feet would be. He was unclothed 4. Yeah, he was unclothed, which bothered him. He wanted to wear clothing and was refused in every turn. Called himself captive, and justifiably so. His feet were unusual.
Look at his body language, like the way this gentleman holds his head and carries the weight of what he's saying. It seems very real. There's a very he seems very emotionally connected to what he's saying. He seems like a very empathetic person.
When that his the plantar area had a very large knob underneath what we would call our heel. His facial features were grotesque in comparison to what he showed me what normal would be. He was
Normal of his type?
yes, yes. He was bilaterally symmetrical to the extent that the disease process was not changing his facial figures, his features. Nose was recessed, not a nose like we have, but basically two opercula, 2 orifices. An extremely small mouth, a hard palate, no teeth. His musculature, again, it was suffering from the problem at the myoneural junction due to the neuropathy.
Do you have any idea what his chronological age was?
622.
622.
And that I don't know. That I don't know. That number 622 is now used as an important number within the community. A reference, a request from 622 or a report from 622 could be from anybody. So it's used, and in fact, the SRB report that I have with me today, the supplemental report for 0302 that I have, probably is labeled from reviewer 622. I haven't, it's going to be a cold reading when we look at it, but it's probably from 622. They excrete in a manner that we would excrete. Their external genitalia are different than ours. The females have somewhat like vulva, but they have a clasper situation. The male has a male clasper, the female claspers. And if it looks like a disc,
Sounds complicated.
with rectangular solids that are rotated into position for clasping at the inguinal region. They do have internal fertilization.
Now, this was something you read because you didn't see the female, did you?
No, this is something he showed me of his wife.
Oh,
Whoa.
internally.
Yes.
And how was that image presented to you? Did it appear,
I was inside the image.
you were inside the image?
That's what it felt like.
Like virtual reality?
Yes, everything that he showed me when this was the incident. When he projected it into me, it felt like I was there.
There it is again, the telepathy. That description of thought projection or telepathy as being like you're absorbed in the thing, like the thought or the projection becomes almost like a hologram that you're inside of. I've heard that many times. I've heard it described that way. I wonder how much detail is conveyed that way, and I wonder if it's like 100% real or if it feels more dreamlike.
My sensations were heightened. Quite extraordinary.
Was there a background perceived? Was she in a domicile of some sort?
again, excuse the pun, a gray surrounding, very, very dull, drab surrounding, almost like a concrete evacuation center, where you'd have evacuation zones underneath the hotels in case of mass casualties or a mass disaster.
Like a parking garage or something.
It was a very clinical environment.
So were you impressed that he was kind of depressed about his situation?
He was extremely depressed. If we were to term him human, I'm not a psychologist, but I think he would be termed as clinically depressed.
Wow. Wow, weird point. It's been said, it's been rumored that there is at least some of these beings are fleeing some kind of biological catastrophe or something has happened to them, and they're not as all powerful and invincible as they would like us to believe, and maybe they're coming back to build their genetic line in some way, or to have they need something from us they have to get to like help get them out of the jam that they're in. That sounds like what he's describing here.
He wept, but he didn't weep outside. He wept when he was with me.
Well, could you estimate what his...
Look at his body language.
was?
Smarter than me. He was smarter than me by a long range.
Did he have a wide range of knowledge?
The mathematics that he showed me blew my mind.
Was that right?
He showed me concurrently not only the equations for the rule of nines, but he also did so diagrammatically, and he did so with three-dimensional, like a VRML system, where I was watching cubes come together. So that if I was not understanding the script, I would understand it as a child learns group theory in mathematics.
Wow.
Highly evolved, highly intellectual, highly repressed emotionally. When I was with him, I felt great happiness to be with him, but I could feel his great sadness, not only because of what he wanted to become, what he knew he was by being present with us, but where he was and how he was being treated. He was not part of the group that has to be catered to involving the T9 treaty that was just signed. He wanted to help. He was willing. When I went in for...
Okay, whoa, the T9 treaty, the other group, the group that has to be catered to, who's that group? That's what I want to know. What's the T9 treaty? It has a name? That's weird. He wanted to help, but he wasn't part of the group that has to be catered to. So there's a group out there that we've signed something called the T9 treaty with. We've heard about this lately. This is coming up again and again. We maybe have some agreement with different beings, and this sounds like what they're talking about. Whoa.
God's sakes, I took well over, nearly 300 individualized aspiration samples from his neurological system. He would hold his arm out for me to take them. There was no pain medication, and whenever I would fire the introduction system to remove the sample, it was an aspirative avulsion system, he would cry, and then he would just stand there and look at me.
There was a suction.
Yes, yeah. In fact,
it's like a little.
I would bring the sample after the initial removal from his tissues into the introduction system, and then approve it and move it from there to one of the helper biologists. Usually it was Robert, outside of the clean sphere, and then he would move it from there to be handled under our normal protocols. It was a level 5 past our the BMBL system.
Did you notice how he teared up a little bit when he just described what he was talking about, taking the samples from the being, the J-Rod, and how he could feel the pain of that telepathically? And then if you go back and watch it, his eyes gloss over. He looks like he's tearing up. I'm telling you, there's something about this guy's conversational style. There's something about his body language. There's something about his presence and his vibe that this just sounds real. Sounds like this man went through and actually experienced what he's talking about, and he's describing it in such great detail. I don't know how you bullshit your way through a story like this. I mean, the level of detail that he's including is like, he knows the names of the people he was in the room with. He knows where the holographic projector was, where the viewing gallery was, where the clean sphere was, like what the procedure was, and how many steps there are to get from standing outside to in the suit to in the room. He's describing all of these tiny little details that are so specific. If you were making this story up off the top of your head, or if you were just a bullshitter and you were just trying to like wow some people with a crazy story, I don't see how the average bullshitter would it just doesn't seem likely to me that someone would sit down and think out all of these mundane, boring little details and then include them as part of the overall tapestry of things going on in the space. But he's describing, like, he's creating a sense of ambiance and a sense of place and time and the people involved, and he's describing their emotional states, and he seems to be emotionally reacting to what he's saying. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments.
He'd just stand there and take it.
So,
He's really uncomfortable with this.
do you feel the communication that he established with you when you were in contact with him, could he extend this communication over any distance?
60 feet.
60 feet?
Definitely 60 feet.
60 feet.
Because it was 60 feet from the center of the clean sphere to the introduction ramp going down into the ambassadorial suite. So
Ambassadorial
at least 60 feet.
suite.
So you don't feel like he's been in communication with you since that time?
No.
Okay.
Sounds like telepathy works in line of sight, at least in this case.
Was it willfully selective on his part who he wanted to communicate?
Yes. Yes. The folks that I'm sorry. The folks that wanted to find out what he was saying to me, they knew darn well that he was communicating with me after a while, because I was smiling. I couldn't help it, because we were actually joking back and forth. And, you know, they didn't know. They didn't have any clue. They didn't have any clue
At least
what
they
he
have
was
a
saying.
sense of humor.
So it had to have been selective. They certainly wouldn't have pressed me like they did after I woke up from the big attention scenario. I woke up outside of the clean sphere. I was drug out of there by Stephen. He finally got a secondary suit on and drugged me out of the clean sphere. No, they had no clue. They had no clue what he was saying. I'm sure of it. They were extra rough in removing my plug and my catheter and all of that business after I got out of the TES.
Catheter? This sounds really complicated. Like, you put on this suit, you're in there for how many hours? So they catheterize you? That means that these guys are working in this clean sphere for hours and hours and hours. They're not allowed to leave, or leaving and coming and going involves suiting up like an astronaut. So that tracks. That makes sense, right? Catheter? Weird detail.
Yeah. One of the things that I want to ask you.
Can you imagine being catheterized every time you had to go to work? It's like you get to work with and talk to an alien, but you have to wear a catheter.
Now, departing slightly from this subject, we're going to ask this last question, then we're going to take a break, okay? And then we'll see where we go from there. But
I'm smiling because I'm envisioning the lack of the lights.
yeah, okay. But everybody's
Yeah, don't like this at all.
Why? And of course, you're going to have to restate this again. Why are you talking to us now? What is your intention in telling us about this, about your involvement?
It's multifocal. It's multifocal. There's several reasons. The largest reason is not the most important reason. The largest reason from a personal perspective is to step out from under the Black Ops community and retire. I'm ready. I told you before, I can see myself walking along a pond and not being
In Russia, Black Ops community retires you.
bothered by anybody except for maybe a bird here or there, and taking a sample and just taking my time and looking at it for fun, for enjoyment.
Is Dan Burisch still alive? Does anybody know? Somebody check that out.
Worried about your health, right?
Well, my health is degrading. There's no doubt about that.
Uh-huh.
The heart disease that I have is in fact degrading my health. Time is coming. I don't know how long that is, and of course that's within God's providence.
So you'd
I-
like to maybe have some freedom, to have some
Yes.
time of your own?
Yes.
To go to Walden's Pond or something, right? Study the life.
Disappear at Walden's Pond.
Right.
There are other reasons too. Without yelling the poor me scenario. Yes, people have a right to know. I mean, that's, other folks have screamed that. Some of them, I think, real. Some of them phony as a $3 bill. Yes, they have a right to know what is going on. They have a right to know because this is their future. Or maybe not.
That's what Colonel Corso said. Colonel Corso said that Phil Corso, author of The Day After Roswell, said in a number of interviews that people have a right to know because this is their future. And he had a really great point about that. He said that in World War II, we sent kids, 17, 18, 19-year-old kids, into machine gun fire on D-Day, and they were able to handle that. Surely we can handle whatever it is we need to know. And it's their future. This is the world that our children are going to grow up in, so they deserve to know. I think that's a fine point.
And it depends upon our wisdom or lack thereof. This gets me thinking. The one thing that we've heard from the Brookings Institution study, the famous clamp study, was this would cause a great social upheaval. It would destroy our social bonds, our religious bonds. And in fact, I know I'm digressing, but I ramble. Every time an individual is approached with the issue of, would this destroy your faith? I have heard, it's my experience only, I'm sure there are going to be varied opinions, no, it'd strengthen it. It'd strengthen it. From a certain perspective, yes. From another perspective, no. The Brookings Institution was correct on a certain level. Suspend disbelief for a moment and walk with the idea that this is real. That the ruins that are present on the moon and on Mars, the ancient temples, are in fact the gifts of our own progeny. Can you imagine what is going to happen when those temples, which were prayed to as the gods, are found out to be nothing more than the creations of men, that the men themselves were those who were being worshipped? Will fall headlong into the pool of Narcissus. And maybe that's a good thing. Maybe that's a good thing. Maybe we'll find truth, love, God, in something other than buildings and stones and marble. Maybe we'll find out who he really is.
I know I keep going on about Ingo Swann, but that's just because I finished his book Penetration recently. And in that book, he talks about very specifically structures on the moon. We've heard this from a number of different people, that there's something on the moon that we are being kept from discovering or seeing. And there are structures there, and there's stuff on Mars that we're not aware, or that NASA is aware of, but that the general public is not aware of. This certainly tracks with that. It sounds like he's suggesting that some of the things that were made that are there now were made by future humans that time traveled, and that somehow that affected our religious history on this planet.
Or she, it, or just us.
Do you want to take a break?
Please.
Take 5 minutes, yeah, take 5 minutes and talk about what we just talked about.
Yeah.
Just a little bit about the clean sphere entrance in terms of suiting up, preparing yourself. You did mention the medical exams, which fade out after a while.
Right.
But in the other tape, you talked a little bit more about some of the mechanical specifics, just to give a better image of
That's fine.
what it's like for you to do it.
That's fine.
Okay, that was
The
one.
introduction gantry, the swinging hose.
The swing
system,
goes
all
up. Yes, those things. Yeah, they
That's
just
all visual, and I'm interested in the dulcing facility.
Uh,
Train what you're
Hold
talking
on,
about.
hold on. One thing at a time. One thing at a time. The other thing is
We can wait.
that might be pertinent to what you just did, what you just spoke about, was what you were looking at slide-wise prior to knowing what the unknown origin material was, what its origin was.
Sure.
You know, just what it was you were looking at.
All right.
Without revealing.
You want me to get into the microbial?
Well, maybe just a general statement of what that was,
All right.
what you thought you were looking at. Just to give us a little bit.
That's a good one.
You know,
I had no clue, and in fact, they brought in who we got on our side, a biochemist to turn our attitudes around. And after about a year, he didn't turn our attitudes around. He finally joined us. And finally said, no, we can't do this without finding out the origin of the tissue. Right. We needed to find out. See, we were dealing with it. We were dealing with a situation where it was in vitro.
We might want to go back on camera for this. So
That's fine.
Okay. And the other thing that I think you made a very good statement about why you're doing this. I'm wondering if there's anything else we can do for you, anything else you can say that is of value to you that we can record for you, as far as what you hope to, how you hope to get out, what it is about. I mean, you said it's your health and a number of other things. I'm just wanted to put it to you that if there's anything else that comes to mind that you'd like to add in that regard, in terms of what it is you're trying to accomplish. Because I would like to tell our elected government what we're doing. Maybe you should say that. You know, I mean, under the appropriate circumstances, because there are military applications that need to be handled in a very careful manner. For example. For example. I understand. All right.
That's very close to what David Grush and Lou Elizondo and Carl Nell have all said. It's the very similar language that they use, and it's they do definitely treat the conversation with a degree of seriousness that I think is appropriate for what we're talking about. And it's interesting how frequently they talk about how out of the loop Congress is on all this, and how there's no oversight on this program. So that's an interesting point.
Those issues we're going to be extremely careful about here today, because they should be taken with great care. Of course, our objective, which including the military applications for Lotus.
I know that we're somewhat constrained for time today. Well, how much longer do we have?
It's only 16:37.
How much time do we have?
We've got time.
Okay.
I have to be back at 1900.
1900, 7 o'clock.
7 o'clock.
Okay.
Okay, we have plenty of time.
All right. All right. Okay, good.
We're not in a
All right.
rush.
Well, what I wanted to do was, the only other thing I had to say was, we're trying to focus on, and it's been great so far. It's been very focused. It's very, very central to the J-Rod interaction We felt that was the best way to introduce you to our next stage.
Right.
Now, we can talk about anything we want. We got plenty of tape, as long as you can stand the lights. You know, beyond the three things I just mentioned, anything you might want to bring up.
Do you think
So
that
in
thing is
order.
real? Do you think that thing is real?
What's that?
That piece of paper you showed me with the letters. I don't know. See, we spoke about another individual who has a heart condition. I figured that it was a need to know. It was a need to know basis above that. I didn't figure that there was direct. You see, and the rumors coming at me about the potential for public acclamation, that would be for him, those initials to take back as the hero in this situation, because he loves playing the hero. And you show me a piece of paper that says ordered to remain. Ostensibly, that's what it meant. Ordered to remain in the capacity, which means that there is a greater loop. I've had the chance to speak with the individual one time, and he was funnier than hell. He really was. I heard that there was a transcript involving that got out. In fact, I was shown one time. The first meeting, the one where I bolted, the one where you scared the hell out of me, not as much as you did today, but in a little more relaxed circumstance.
I infer their use, and I've seen this elsewhere, of the word bird refers to EVE.
Mm-hmm.
I infer the use of the word clock refers to timeline paradox.
Mm-hmm. I would buy that.
Before we, let's talk a little bit about the things we just discussed. What was it that you thought you were looking at when you were looking at these slides of material of unknown origin?
Well,
prior to meeting J.
we were looking at extremely minute microglial cells. We knew that they were eukaryotic. However, they were unusual in the sense that their cytoplasm and their internal organization, the organelle structures were fused, such as dictyosomes to mitochondria, things like that. And we had no idea what we were looking at. The original contention made by the individuals next to me was that we were looking at some type of biological warfare material, an intermediate, and they had more experience. They have more experience than me involving such matters. So, and being that I was new, I was letting them take the lead.
Okay, science people, biology people, people with advanced degrees that understand what he's talking about, please fact check what he's saying. Like, does this make sense to anyone? I don't know what I'm looking at, and I honestly don't know. So it's hard for me to know whether this is made up or nonsense. So please let me know in the comments what you think about what he has to say here. This sounds like very specific jargon.
That's great. Now let's talk a little bit. The second one was tell us a little bit more in detail about the physical aspects of preparing for an entry into the sphere.
Fine. Well, we would undergo a medical examination, at least during the early time frame of the introductions, the 92 time frame, 91 to 92, when we were doing introductions. We had regular systematic medicals by a physician. Following that, we would be suited, we would be catheterized, plugged, and suited. Communication apparatus was placed on our heads. We had a cooling system set up. It was, for all
like an
intents
astronaut.
and purposes, it was a spacesuit. It
Space
was a total
suit. There you go.
encapsulated suit. Something like what you would find in a NASA facility. Not so much something that you would see, well, for instance, at USAMRIID or CDC. that type of level 4 suit. It was more of a regular space type suit with joints. We were suited up, we were pressurized, and then walked with our cooling system and our hosing down a ramp into the ambassadorial suite. Following that, we were led up a gantry way, which had been moved into position by the clean sphere, which had been previously rotated up through an iris through the floor. He was held actually below the ambassadorial suite level, and that was raised up as needed.
Wait, what? A clean sphere, pressurized clean sphere that comes up through the floor, through an iris, like the Stargate iris that opens, and then this sphere comes up into the room, and then there's an observation deck and a gantryway, and you walk. This sounds like Stargate. Sounds like when you walk up the gantryway with your suit on, your gear. Wow.
They did with him down there, he didn't say, and they didn't tell me. It was not a need-to-know issue. Apparently, they dealt with the cleaning of the sphere and all of that down there. The regular housed animal maintenance, as they treated him. We would be led up the gantryway. The hoses would be hooked into an interior system inside the doorway, which was exterior to the clean sphere. And it was called the exterior system, in fact. But then we would be led in. The door would be closed, and we would be pressurized inside of the gantryway. Following that, there was a drum system that was set up. Once there was an equal pressurization between the gantryway and the clean sphere, we would then be told to proceed forward. I would raise a hand in acknowledgement. We were not supposed to talk at the time at all because nothing verbal around the specimen, around the J-rod. Why, I was never told, but we were not supposed to talk around the J-rod. I moved the drum system and re-hooked a secondary set of hosing inside the clean sphere, checked the pressurization, and once that was done, the door to the clean sphere would be closed behind me, and I would presume that the pressurization remained the same in the gantryway. Following that, I would do my business inside of the clean sphere involving contacting the J-rod and removing the samples.
It's a lot of detail. For a made-up story, that's a lot of detail.
We were removing samples to attempt a treatment, a full diagnosis and a treatment for a paraprotein-related monoclonal gammopathy of uncertain significance type disorder, which had various attributes to it, among which were a cocaine type presence to the J-rod, cocaine syndrome type presence, and certain genetic issues involving chromosome 5 and 17, which led us to Charcot-Marie tooth disorder, and their glycoprotein, their antifreeze glycoprotein problems. They were essentially they were losing heat because of the problems at their axillemal ridges. They were not transmitting the energy, something like a dystrophy. Can
anybody translate this?
A nerve. Well, their action potentials were dying at the synapse. They were also losing energy because there was a demyelination process underway. That demyelination process was, since the Q94 document, was tied to a CMT1A-like problem, the Charcot-Marie tooth problem called PMP22, which is a protein number 22, which an overexpression of that gene causes a greater demyelination. We tied that to the demyelination issue involving the promoters for the PMP22. Those promoters, there's two promoters for it, were selectively deselected with the use of TFOs, or triplets forming oligonucleotides. It's essentially an ssDNA vector expression system that we're using. Oops.
Doesn't that...
You're staring at me, Bill. I'm sorry.
Bill, one thing, when
Sparks
you,
just flew out of my head.
Don't sort of make any noises, just nod, that's good.
When I'm not...
Sometimes we're going, ooh, ah, ee, that's a...
Okay.
keep Mr. nodding. Right.
That's all he's been doing is nodding. I shouldn't.
All right. So do you want to suppose simplify?
I'm sorry, Bill.
No, I don't, actually, no, I think that's fine.
I'm sorry, Bill.
I actually understood some of it.
That's all right. Doesn't that interfere in the demyelination process? Okay, isn't that similar to conditions that humans sometimes have, like, what is it, muscular
Parkinson's?
dystrophy?
Well, yeah, except for he wasn't forming plaques.
Okay.
He wasn't forming plaques. He was simply demyelinating, repairing the demyelination area with the immune system. They've got a cell-mediated immune system, humoral system, just like we have. The cells are different. They've got Philopodia, but very strange looking blood-like material. It's like it, but that's why we use the term analog so much, because it was different. It was different.
Can we talk a little bit about some generalities around the building in which you worked? The sort of, how many floors it was, where it was located,
Sure.
how you got there.
You want an experience of Site 4, watch the Andromeda strain. Except for there's a little more color inside of Site 4. They've got a nice orange stripe on the wall, and they've got a red and blue stripe on the floor, which gives you general directions depending upon the floor you're on, and you can't move without getting stopped anyway. Now we're talking separate to the groom facility here. I'm aware of several floors at the groom facility, and then finally the majority of the hot stuff was taken over to Site 4. We're talking 4 basic levels. The first level, and they're coded 4.1, 4.2, 4.3, 4.4, and then finally where he was stored as 4.5. And that 4.5 designation was painted on the wall for him because 4 and 5 is 9.
Right.
That's why, in fact, they built 9 hangars on the Galileo and Sidekick levels, the 4.1 level. The 4.2 level contained the looking glass, Alice's glass. In fact, outside of the door for the major facility, there's a white rabbit with a clock. A very large, it's a statue that's probably about that tall, and it's held above the doorway. It's wired above the doorway. The looking glass, I find out, is one of the ERBs. It's an Einstein-Rosen bridge promoter. It uses some form of, and this is found out, Jesus Christ, in the last 2 weeks. I'm asking the right questions there, I guess. It's composed of a spherical, spinning, arced, rectangular solid matrix of nickel, cadmium, and barium. There is a spinning disk underneath it, which is supercooled. Into this is injected into the center of these spinning, and I'm not a physicist, spinning disks. Is injected an argon gas. Into that is injected some type of repulsion matter. It's a gravity repulsion matter.
This kind of sounds like the superconducting disk that Ning Li was working on, the anti-gravity researcher Ning Li that we talked about in a recent video. And there's a picture of her holding this device with 2 other researchers, and it looks like a record. Actually, the box looks like a record player with a record on it. But it sounds very similar. It was like a superconducting disk that was highly charged and spinning inside of some other device.
Obtaining the gravity repulsion matter from the heavy materials that have been obtained from the J-rods, the 115 variety material.
Element 115? That was a Bob Lazar reference. What does that mean?
And apparently when they bombard it with enough electromagnetism, this stuff repels gravity, and it turns into some sort of exotic matter. They spin it fast enough, it opens, or they can see through it.
I recently heard, again, this is all rumor, but I recently heard that one of the reasons there's a shoot down program to take down and recover these craft is because some of the materials that are used in building our reproduction vehicles cannot be made or manufactured here on Earth. So they have to be recovered from craft. So they shoot down some craft and they're able to go in and then get some of the stuff like element 115 apparently and use that.
And that is, from what I understand, the great prize in what's going on in the world right now, are those devices. Why do you think the British are running around Iraq right now looking for the climatological records that are just happen to be disappeared out of the Baghdad Museum with the rest of the cylinder seals? And you're going to see some cylinder seals today too when I show you some report.
So Dan, does that mean when they're engaging this device in Project Looking Glass,
Yes.
is this something that they use only for the transmission of information, or can they transport a material object through time?
You know the answer to that. At least you've probably heard some rumor. There have been mistakes. There were mistakes. Animals were attempted to transport from one location to another, the production of 2 of the devices, and they put them in resonance or something like that. I'm not a physicist. I don't know. But I was, in fact, present during a human attempt. The human did not survive. The human was not put in there under duress of any sort. It was a volunteer situation, and the human did not survive.
Holy shit. You know what that reminds me of? In Star Trek, the motion picture, there's a scene where they're getting the Enterprise ready to leave dry dock or space dock, and they're going to go off on this mission. And they are testing out the transporters on this new refitted Enterprise. And they're beaming some people on board, and the people get like completely scrambled inside the transporter. And when they come through the other side, they don't survive. It just totally reminded me of that. This sounds like what he's describing. This ERB sounds like a Stargate. I know I keep beating this drum like the Stargate drum, but there's so many parallels here to the Stargate TV show. It sounds like when they tried to send a person through it, this person didn't survive, and they Can you imagine being the volunteer to go through an experimental portal? And it's like you got a couple of eggheads, and they're like, "All right, we've got these 2 things in resonance. We're not really sure what's going to happen. We threw a couple of pencils through, and it seemed like they were okay coming out the other side. Why don't you go ahead, Larry, take a step inside this thing, and let's see what happens."
The human did not move. The human stayed where the human was put. But the human changed, and I don't want to talk about it anymore.
Ooh.
Was it an attempt at time travel?
It was an attempt at well, in essence, yes. It was a linear. It was a attempt to transport an individual over linear distance, which I understand is the same thing as time travel.
Whoa.
If we're talking purely from the Einstein,
It sounds like this got messy.
Time, space.
distance is time.
Like a transporter?
Yeah. From what I understand, they've only used it for information purposes. Aside from that, how they get the information out of it, no clue. I don't know. What specific information they've obtained, I only know of one piece of information, and that is the rush, why the rush is underway to get Lotus done by the 2005 deadline. That in fact this group of J-rods that are not complying with the wishes of the committee and the wishes of the rest of the J-rods and the associated brothers, to put a clamp on them so that they stop their influence within the political structures of our government, including
What?
the financial structures.
Okay. Whoa, freeze. I Did you just hear what he said? That there's multiple groups of J-rods, and that some of them are influencing our government and financial systems, and there is a device they could use to see the future that they're using to figure out that something is supposed to happen before a particular deadline, and they have to deal with this situation. What?
That it is, in fact, their slowing down of the progress to stopping getting these, picking up these little gates that were put together. That would be our downfall in 2012.
Okay.
2012, huh?
Do you want to say anything further about the Stargates
Stargate, there it is.
or their use
Ooh.
in 2012?
Well,
Chevron's locked.
Before we go,
They'll-
let's finish up our third objective when we turn the lights back on.
what can one do for me?
Yes, exactly.
I would be very happy and very relieved to feel as though I was responding to the elected government of the United States of America with what talents God's given me. I'm responsible to the people of the United States of America. The nature of the information to which I'm privy is sensitive enough that the full disclosure of that information would have to be done in an appropriate location and under appropriate circumstances.
God, that's almost exactly what David Grush said. That's almost exactly what David Grush said. It's weird to see these guys, like, sometimes, look, there are people that are complete bullshitters, and their stories don't make any sense. And it just sounds like, I'm talking about the guys who were like, I served in the secret space program. I was a space marine on whatever. You see some of that stuff on various YouTube channels, but this rings very true, and it rhymes very well with what David Grush has said very recently, and Gary Nolan and some others.
Certain military application information would have to be done in a closed session milieu
And skiff. We need
for
a skiff.
the national security. As I said to you at the Luxor, the Congress knows it's not in control, and they want that control back. They're not stupid. They know that there are things that are going on down the hall from them that they can't fathom. They deserve to have that back in their hands because that's what they were elected to do. And if we care at all about what's left of our Constitution, they deserve to have that in their hands. Aren't we the masters of our destiny in our country? Aren't we supposed to be? Yes, sir. Supposed to be.
Okay, yeah, let's break for a minute. And, you have a question, more questions you want? I want you to do it. Yeah, okay. Go ahead.
He's dead serious. That's for sure. I mean, this guy is like 110% balls to the wall serious. We've heard that theme recently too. Congress isn't in charge. They don't have the control that they think they do, or that we might like them to have. Which is, they're bought and paid for anyway. But this is really interesting.
How you doing? Let's go. Go ahead.
This is more to do with
I hate these lights, but I'm fine.
just a little bit longer. Want something new?
No, that's fine. I expected the largest light I would have would be a CRT. I was comfortable with that too.
I'm quite interested in if you could describe for me sort of what it was like when you were first introduced to J-Rod. When you actually sort of walked in, presumably that he was in the clean sphere and you were kind of taken into that part of the facility. What was your reaction when you first saw him?
I thought it was an insect.
Sorry,
That's fine.
we lost the line. We'll take a break.
Okay, let's take a break.
Stretch.
Wellington, I went to Dover Grammar School for Boys,
Oh, really?
on the hill over Dover.
4 years. I like
Yeah, indeed. We were right above Dover College, and they had all the girls down at Dover College.
Right. Was it a boys' school, I take it?
Yes.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
Wellington. We were not allowed to communicate with the females in the village.
We had Grand Master, Headmaster Coleman.
Oh, right. We called him the master, actually.
Yes.
We called him headmaster there.
Didn't want to call him anything else. He had a cane.
I ran away, actually.
Good man.
Yeah, really. Had enough of that rubbish. Okay, so it's back to that question. Let me just rephrase it for you. Can you describe in detail the first time what it was like to meet this being for the first time?
My original feeling was I was looking at a giant insect. It's the best I can just off the cuff. It looked like a giant insect, being dark brown and hunched in a corner, very insectoid in appearance. It almost looked like it had an exoskeleton. I felt afraid inside because I was always told that monsters weren't real. And now I find out they are, but they live in the heart of men.
That's chilling, right? It's strange to me how many people who claim to meet a non-human intelligence or an alien being or an extraterrestrial, whichever term you're most comfortable with, but they describe meeting it or meeting them, and it's sort of like the way they would describe meeting anyone. And occasionally you'll see someone like Dan Burisch here, and when he describes it, actually talking about the emotional state and the sense of panic and the physical reaction to seeing it, that makes it sound to me much more credible. It just feels like a much more human answer, a very honest answer.
It was fear, excitement, complete astonishment, because honestly, I thought we were dealing with some sort of monkey, something like an old world ape or the like. But
or an insect or a monkey, which is it?
Indeed, it wasn't. That's what my feeling was. This, I'm not going to lay on and talk about how intellectual I was at the time about it. It scared the hell out of me.
What in terms of actually when you first confronted
That sounds
the-
honest.
a non-human being, an extraterrestrial, something not of this world?
I'm trying to remember what I was feeling when I was looking at the briefing books. Because even when we were first introduced to the J-Rod, they were him-hawing around as to its origin, his origin. Poppycock. I didn't believe it initially. I didn't believe it. However, deep inside, I held open the possibility, because of what happened to me earlier in my life. I held open the possibility that such things could be true. But wouldn't happen to me. Put it to you that way. It's that old, can't happen to you feeling. So to me, it was poppycock. It was rubbish.
I don't know, guys. My bullshit meter is not going off at all in this guy. Like, body language, facial cues, eye line, the tone of his voice, the way that he hesitates. I mean, this feels legitimately like something this man truly believes he experienced.
Until I found out otherwise.
Before going on to the next question, can you talk a little bit about the briefing books? That series?
Sure. They were called King Tuts, and They were basically King. They were all labeled with Ks. The ones that I was allowed, they were blue binders. They were all labeled with Ks. They had DTIC on the front of them, and I still don't know what DTIC. This is 1987, end of '87, and I still don't know what the letters mean. I haven't done independent searches on the net, or I would be. So if you can tell me, what does DTIC mean?
Does anybody know?
It's a shot for
What
me
does
to find out. I don't know
DTIC
either.
mean? Let's ask ChatGPT.
They had a white DTIC printed on the front of them. They were marked with several sections, including physiology, general biology, social structure, political structure of the J-rods, their origins, potential implications for interactions with humankind, cross-contamination issues. They were full of as much information that I could take in during the times that they were allowing me to read them. But I still don't know what that damn DIT or DTIC means.
Okay, that's interesting. Bob Lazar says something similar, that he was given a number of briefing booklets and materials to read. And he talks about some of the things that he read in those materials, one of which was that human beings were seen as containers for something. He talks about this. You've probably heard this before. It's been this like weird piece of UFO lore for a very long time. Linda Moulton Howe talks about it a lot. But I also have heard, and I think this feels true as well, that occasionally what they'll do is they'll bring somebody into the program, and then at a lower level, when they're first bringing them in, they'll give them a bunch of false information, maybe mixed in with some legitimate information, but they'll give them a bunch of materials to read, and some of it will be real, some of it will be fake. And if they don't make it through the final selection process and they have to be sent back, tossed back, I guess, if they go back into circulation, they're just speaking gobbledygook as far as anyone else is concerned, which is very possibly what's going on. That makes perfect sense. That seems like a totally, I'm not an intelligence or counterintelligence expert. Maybe somebody out there can check me on this, but that seems legitimate, right? It just seems like a logical thing to do. So it's possible that that's what happened here to Dan, or it could be that maybe he made it past that level and he got as far as he got. He's saying this was 1987. So Predator didn't come out until 1988. 1987. What were the big summer movies that year? Hang on. ChatGPT is frozen for me. I'm trying to pull this up. DTIC in ChatGPT. But for some odd reason, my internet is just like completely out today. All right, we'll come back to this. In the meantime, if anybody else can find out, let me know.
Yeah, they were called King Tuts. They were update books. The one person. This is another reason why I didn't figure that, how Stephen, how I could be promoted to a working group leader above Stephen. Of course, I found out, and I told you why.
Right.
At the time, because he kept the updates. He made sure that all of the King Tuts were updated. He did the briefing films that are still resident at Site 4, or at least the last visit.
Briefing films at S4. Can you imagine what a briefing film at S4 would look like? It's probably like that scene from Starship Troopers with Doogie Howser, where he's like, aim for the brainstem, put him down for good. God, that would be funny, just to get your hands on some of those training films.
So, the man of that importance, I couldn't figure out why. But again, that's moot. Yeah.
I mean, what was actually in these briefing documents? I mean, can you explain a little bit of the detail?
Sure.
This guy seems like he's emotionally wasted. This guy seems like he's completely emotionally destroyed or resigned to some kind of like final outcome that is beyond anyone's control. Does anybody else get that vibe? It's a very specific vibe, but he's vibing that vibe pretty hard right now, and it's a little unnerving. I would say this would fall under S for somber. I'm going to file this under S for somber.
Close-knit, very well-ordered society, one which is numerologically based, one which speaks to others that were called brothers, that I now find out are those who left on a spiritual path to another location, to the famed Duat of Orion, the Epsilon Orionis area. Head-to-toe physiology, including real autopsy photographs, not the Santilli kind, but the real autopsy photographs. He can't sue me for that, I hope. He won't raise his head probably, but that was disgusting. The Brookings Institute paper was present.
He's talking about the Ray Santilli alien autopsy video that came out in the 90s that was widely circulated. And it was rumored within the UFO research community that that was a deliberate fake that had been put together to sort of throw some misinformation and misdirection out into the information pool because there had been some other leaks that had taken place around that time. At least that's my recollection of it.
As well as several position papers clarifying the Brookings Institute. However, each of these that I was allowed into, they had separate folders and they had separate clips within them inside these three-ring binders. And I was told which numbers I was allowed to open up. And they were given to me on a card, and those are the ones that I was allowed to review during the times that I was allowed to review them. Most of the stuff, they had everything from military applications, the physics of the craft, and I couldn't have cared less. I was more interested in taking in the biology issues.
Real quick, DTIC, all right, ChatGPT is down for some reason. I can't get it up, but I was able to get up, DuckDuckGo. DTIC, Defense Technical Information Center. Oh, I just clicked it. I'm on a list. I'm on a list now. DTIC org chart, March 2024. Ooh, this is interesting. Hold up. Stand by. Check this out. DTIC Defense Technical Information Center. DTIC's mission is to preserve, curate, and share knowledge from DoD's annual multi-billion-dollar investment in science and technology, multiplying the value and accelerating capability to the warfighter. The Defense Technical Information Center has served the information needs of the defense community for more than 70 years. DTIC reports to the Undersecretary of Defense, Research and Engineering, USD R&E. Our mission is to preserve, curate, and share knowledge from DoD's annual multi-billion-dollar investment in science and technology, multiplying the value and accelerating capability to the warfighter. More than 50% of the research records in the collection are available through the access-controlled R&E Gateway, which is accessible to DoD personnel, defense contractors, federal government personnel and contractors, and selected academic institutions. The R&E Gateway sites require Common Access Card, CAC login, or registration. We also provide the general public and industry with access to unclassified, unlimited information, including many full-text downloadable documents through this website. As a DoD field activity under the Undersecretary of Defense for Research and Engineering, the DTIC responsibilities include preserve and disseminate the research that led to the technologies our warfighters use today, deliver the tools and collections that empower the research and engineering enterprise to accelerate the development of technologies that will help maintain U.S. technical superiority. Stimulate innovation with public and industry access to DoD-funded research and digital data. Maximize the value of each dollar the DoD spends through the analysis of funding data, work in progress, and IR&D to identify gaps, challenges, and the way forward. These areas of responsibility support USD R&E in their efforts to mitigate new and emerging threat capabilities, enable affordable new or extended capabilities in existing military systems, and develop technology surprise through science and engineering. DTIC also manages the Information Analysis Centers, which provide essential technical analysis and data support to a diverse customer base, to include the Combatant Commands, CCMDs, the Office of Secretary of Defense, defense agencies, and the military services. IACs actively partner and collaborate with defense research and engineering focus groups and communities of interest in cyber, homeland defense, and defense systems. They are staffed with scientists, engineers, and information specialists to provide the research and analysis to customers with diverse, complex, and challenging requirements. That's not bad for first take. Here's their history. 1945 to 1948, U.S. Army Air Corps, the U.S. Navy, and the British Air Ministry established the Air Documents Research Center, ADRC, in London. The ADRC becomes the Air Document Division of the Intelligence T2 Department of the Headquarters, Air Technical Services, Army Air Force, Wright Field, Dayton, Ohio. 1948, ADD becomes the Central Air Documents Office, where scientific and technical reports are collected, processed, and distributed. 1951, the Armed Services Technical Information Agency is established. CADO is renamed ASTIA. ASTIA takes over CADO's operations for document collection. ASTIA moves from Wright-Patterson Air Force Base to Arlington Hall Station in Arlington, Virginia. ASTIA is renamed the Defense Documentation Center for Science and Technical Information. That's exactly the place you'd want to put all the UFO stuff, in the most boring sounding program ever. Becomes a DoD field activity of the Defense Supply Agency and moves to Cameron Station, Alexandria, Virginia. Holy moly. Defense Research Development, Test, and Evaluation Online Systems becomes operational. DDC changes its name to officially to the Defense Technical Information Center. When does Skynet become self-aware? Okay, no kidding. I just said, when does Skynet become self-aware? And then I click this thing, and in 2003, it says DTIC initiates private SkyNet, Scientific and Technical Information Network. Holy mo! Is this what he was talking about? Whoa. "2018, DTIC publishes the inaugural issue of Journal of DoD Research and Engineering, a peer-reviewed journal that provides a venue for the department's scientists and engineers to publish their classified and controlled unclassified research." Kind of late in the game to have that. Sounds like a reaction to something. Sounds like they didn't talk very much about what they were working on, and maybe now they're able to talk a little bit more because they were behind. And now they want to get ahead. We're just spitballing. DTIC launches the Innovators Information Repository, an access-controlled online collection of information related to technological innovations made by small, independent United States businesses. Good old mom and pop military contractors. DTIC introduces Smart Tools Tagger, a natural language auto-indexing tool which semantically analyzes a document and then outputs ranked tag listings of concepts and topics summarizing the main themes of that document. So some kind of an AI tool. DTIC, DoD modernization practices, priorities. DTIC creates the DoD modernization priorities space in DoD Techipedia to highlight key technology areas significant to the DoD community. It provides an overview and summary of current and relevant research, news, legislation. The FOIA Requester Service Center was established in compliance. Okay, gang. Well, there you have it. DTIC, Defense Technical Information Center. Let's get back to Dan Burisch's very compelling interview, but wow, did not expect to just duck, go my way into that. That was interesting. It's an interesting diversion. All right, here we go.
Just doesn't interest me. Aside from the fact from the biophysiological interface between the hand, mind, and the craft, because they have on their hands a number of pads, and there are open nerves which are protected by various glycoproteins, and those glycoproteins are selectively pushed forward or sucked back via capillary action. Or they can be, through an active fashion, pulled back, and it kind of pulls a viscous sheath back and allows the J-rod to have direct interface with the craft. That interested me.
That's really interesting. That's new. I have heard in the past that there was some kind of a well, I think Roswell, there was a piece of wreckage from Roswell supposedly that was photographed, and I think these photos have been leaked, but it showed a control panel that had basically like two hand cutouts for hands to sit in, like in Total Recall when Arnold Schwarzenegger, the real Total Recall, not the other one, but when Arnold gets to the reactor in the center of Mars and he goes to turn it on and he's got this like 3-fingered hand thing he has to do. And it holds up. Anyway, I've heard, my understanding up until now was that it was always some kind of a consciousness psychic connection. And I this is new information, that there's a direct physical nerve ending connection, almost like the physical body is genetically engineered to like plug straight into the craft in a very interesting way.
Although most of it at the time, and still some of it now, I have no understanding of. A lot of it has to do with electronics that I don't pretend to understand. I was most interested in looking at issues involving their histology, histopathology issues, including some autopsy photographs that showed disease processes which were naturally occurring within them, isolations of viral material, to include the protocols for new protocols which were being written as they're working, which is what we're doing, which is really what we're doing. We're writing new protocols, new procedures as we're working forward. I mean, all of the old standbys are there, everything from electrophoresis to, what, to anything. But we're writing new protocols as we're going, because this is not new territory. This is, pardon the pun, alien territory.
How many beings have we had to work with?
I only met one. I am aware of possibly 3 from the reading. And at that time, again, I was so stunned by what I was doing. A lot of it was getting by me. When I read the word extraterrestrial, I tunnel visioned. when I finally believed and understood that it was, in fact, an extraterrestrial, none. None.
Okay, thank you. Just want to.
This looks like the face of somebody who really saw an alien and had a total freak out internally and still struggles with the reality of that. That's what I'm seeing. Now, maybe somebody out there's got higher perception points than I do, but I take a look at this and tell me what you think. Play this guy back once or twice or watch it again. Sometimes you have to just look somebody in the eyes and you just have to kind of make a guess. And I don't know, man, you got to trust your gut on those things. But my gut's telling me this guy is talking about something that really happened.
Ask you a question about the telepathic communication, the nature of it. What is it actually like to communicate with one of these beings telepathically? And what do you hear something in your head? Do you hear images, see images, or?
I could hear my voice. No, you can hear yourself think.
Sorry, can you look at the film?
Sorry.
Oh, yeah.
Habit, looking at the people that are. I could hear my voice. However, the cadence, the affect was something that distinguished it other than me. It was no great booming voice from the heavens or anything like that, and I'm glad I do not have a proclivity to hear voices in my head, and have heard none since. But people could probably challenge that. But I could tell that it was somebody other than me, and I could tell because I felt drawn toward the subject that was sending the communication. When the J-Rod spoke with me, prior to the bombardment of the images, it was something that was part of me, but not part of me. I actually felt non-resident for a moment. It was almost an OBE type feeling. And then I could feel myself pull back and experience the sound. It was physical. It was more real than touching an object. And that's the only real time that I felt anything, more physical than physical.
Is there a sort of conveyance of emotion during these communications?
100% emotion. If he was upset, I could feel his pain. It got to the point where, as I was doing the needle introductions, I could feel what he was feeling. So as I would inject the needle under the integument and find my proper location prior to removing the sample, I could feel the needle entering him. So I could feel his feelings.
Were you aware of Bob Lazar anytime when you were there?
I saw a guy out on the MAC outside of the Galileo, the 4-1 area. He was barefoot. And he was just staring off in the distance. This is as we were coming in on the helo. And they keep you within a very confined walking area. This is before they started taking the buses. We were choppered in. When I saw him subsequent to that, when he did the famous nap videos, could have been. It could have been. And this was early on. This was. I can't prove it. I could not positively identify that being Bob. I am aware of his name being mentioned up there, and it was associated with the term bottle washer, which means an engineer, but not a working group leader or anything of the kind. they would have said a DIR or a for director or a geek. I was called a geek, but his name was mentioned. I heard the name Lazar. I didn't hear Bob. I heard Lazar, and it was not Laser. It was definitely Lazar that I heard. But I never had
I would have gone with
interaction
Laser.
with him, or in fact anyone else from Galileo, Sidekick, or Avionics.
How successful were you in assisting this being medically?
Temporary assistance, temporary relief of pain, temporary meaning weeks, temporary adjustment of muscle tone, and then flat out nothing. He got worse. The exacerbation, it got out of control again on him. Since then, there have been, and I'm not certain if he's resident there or not now. There has been a progress. We'll just say progress involving what I was yammering on earlier about the Charcot-Marie Tooth disease, the CMT1A. Their DNA is triplex, and it's not triplex in the way that you would think of a number 3 helix wrapping around the major groove between the 1 and 2 Watson Cricks, the duplex DNA. Their DNA is triplex to the extent that there are what we nicknamed hangers. They look like they're rosettes. The DNAs look like rosettes. They're triplex and then they're braided. It's a supercoiled DNA situation. And we had difficulty even doing anything, let alone anything like a single step markers or anything like that. We had difficulty even sequencing the DNA. Our long interspersed elements are genes which have been shut off, that when combined with the appropriate Hoogsteen base pair milieu, produce a different being. What we were before they made a mistake. A grave mistake.
All right, that sounds a little dramatic, but wow. Okay, so is he saying that human DNA carries dormant genes that could be reactivated and that would revert us back to a prior biological state as a different type of being? Is that what you heard? That's how I'm reading this.
That's our next question, doesn't it? Where they're from and
Well, we can do the treaty.
They're from here.
the treaty thing, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, you sort of mentioned this exchange. There was an exchange going.
there's been exchanges going on for since they spoke with us in 41.
What's the nature of this exchange?
They wish to find a resolution to the broken resonance between they and the other half of they, the so-called Orions and the Reticulans. They also wish to, for fear of extinction, have a relief of the paraprotein-related problem. And speaking about that just for a moment, we found out that some of the disease.
That's fascinating, because if there is a genetic problem that some of these beings are suffering from that they cannot solve themselves and they need our help to solve, then that kind of blows apart the whole myth that they are omnipotent, or at least so advanced that they are like beyond anything we can possibly imagine. And it makes it much more immediate, real, and raw. If they are suffering from some kind of like weird genetic malady that's threatening them with extinction. That's an interesting piece of information.
Process under which they're fighting is a PNA. It's a peptide nucleic acid. I don't know if you're a protein-associated background nucleic acid. And that protein-associated background is a prion.
Prions? Is that
Which
like mad
goes
cow
to one of the
disease?
things that they wanted me to do at Sweetness. Very dangerous, very dangerous. But the exchange process is to solve the problem to prevent what went wrong in 2012.
What went wrong in 2012?
And the rogue, if you will, group of the J-Rods are not cooperating with that. But a deal has been brokered for the T9 treaty to be held in abeyance until 2005. When that treaty is upped in 2005, once they receive what they've asked for, and they should be receiving a little more, and I've already mentioned some of that material that they're not aware of yet, the PNA material and some of the things that we can do with the oligonucleotides to possibly help facilitate their problems. But once that's upped, they are supposed to come under the auspices of the general agreement between the Committee of the Majority and their respective societies. If so, nothing will get turned on aside from what nature and God is providing us in 2012, and we won't separate. However, they will remain as they are, their future selves as well. They will remain as they are, and we will remain as we are. We can't go back.
I feel like I missed a season of something.
That's just something that's impossible as far as what they can tell. Meaning what the looking glass people and the people that are overseeing the star issue, Starflower and the ERBs and all of that, the Einstein-Rosen bridges.
Okay, so far from this interview with Dan Burisch, I have gotten that there is a program called Looking Glass that has access to devices that can basically open a window to see an alternate timeline or a different part of this timeline, transmit information across infinite distances or at least extreme distances, and potentially you could send physical objects from one side of a portal through to another, basically a Stargate in the sense of the television series in the movie with Kurt Russell. They also have a being named J-Rod, referred to as J-Rod, that is a biological being related to humans in some way, extraterrestrial but not alien, from the future, that's here, that's suffering from some kind of a genetic disease that threatens their race with extinction. There's a splinter group of J-Rods that are doing some other thing, and there's some kind of an agreement between MJ-12 and one of these J-Rod groups. And there's some kind of alternate future timeline or convergent timeline problem that apparently has something to do with 2012. It's really fascinating. Whatever we're talking about here, I'm in. I'm ready for the Netflix series or HBO.
Can you explain what the fuck you're talking about?
Can you explain what the fuck you're talking
I
about?
kind of get it because I've been watching your tapes and stuff, but it's so compacted. What you just said is so compacted in your own.
Thank you for that great question, sir.
No, I'm just saying, let's stretch it out a little bit. We might want to begin by being specific. It sounded like you were talking more about what they were going to get in this exchange, and we're kind of curious as to what are we going to get in this exchange?
Well, we're going to get not wiped out.
Okay, what's the problem we're trying to solve vis-a-vis getting wiped out?
The biggest problem is to make sure that I'm supposed to look at you.
Yeah, I know. Sorry.
The biggest problem is to make sure that there are no human-created ERB
Stargates?
machines.
Machines?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds science fiction-ish,
I know.
okay, and it's hokey sounding, okay? To make sure that there are none of them in existence which can automatically turn on when the next age begins on December 21st, 2012. We are apparently going to cross over the plane of the galaxy, which there is a dense network of wormholes. There is supposed to be some sort of enlightenment Whether or not that's the Christ event, or whether that's a burp on a Sunday morning, I don't know what that's going to be. I'm not enough of a scholar that area to figure that out, to know. I do know that failure
It's not an option.
would result in too much energy being directed at our planet from our star. And hence my interest in looking at the pretty pictures above the sun.
Like a solar flare? Okay, that's an interesting point, because what he just said about the Earth or our system crossing across a part of the galactic plane where there's a dense pocket of wormholes. Lou Elizondo said something similar, that it was in a similar vein a while back, and I just remember seeing it, but I couldn't possibly tell you where I saw it. I just remember him saying this. It was an interview he did, and it might have not even been a video interview on YouTube. It could have been audio only on like a podcast. If anybody knows which, this sounds familiar to you, tell me, please. But there's an interview he gave where he said that Earth is going to be passing through a part of space where something is going to change for us, or something was going to happen. And it was something to do with the region of space that our system was in. And we were going to pass through this other region, and it was going to have some kind of an effect on us. And he didn't go any deeper than that. It was just another episode of Blue's Clues. So I filed it away, and I'm like, okay, well, whatever that means. But that's very compelling that he's saying what he's saying, Dan Burisch, because it definitely rhymes.
It's the pace at which these unusual forms are being produced is increasing.
Are we entering an area as we approach this equatorial plane of the galaxy? Okay. Are we entering an area where there is a greater concentration of dust that can
So I've heard.
surround the sun?
So I've heard.
Okay. I have been reading about this, and this is similar to a situation that happens with a classification of star called T-Tauri stars, where there's a lot of dust gathered around, and what happens is that the star, the sun in this particular case, increases its radiation in the infrared and the hard X-ray areas, and there's greater solar flare activity.
Rise your planet.
And in the past, evidently, if we're to believe the mythologies, there was conflagration on our planet.
Mm-hmm.
So would we be in danger of a heat and conflagration?
That would make sense, and that sets well with what I heard, yes.
Okay.
That
Then
is what we're in danger of, that, as well as a large electromagnetic burst from the sun, which will upset our electromagnetic, our poles.
All right. Now, what they're calling ERBs, okay, now called wormholes. We'll talk about the wormholes. You're talking about two different, we're talking about natural, there's a number of natural occurring wormholes.
There are a number of nodes on the planet, from what I'm understanding, that naturally are sensitive electromagnetically. I don't know. Okay, they're naturally sensitive to the space through which we pass.
Okay.
These nodes activate spontaneously when we pass through them, or can be struck with electromagnetism and be temporarily opened.
And what happens if we use a machine to open an artificial wormhole?
Well, it's two different things.
Okay.
One, they're trying to put, well, they have been putting, in fact, Saddam did put two of them together in Iraq, which conformed to the ancient cylinder seals, which are now missing from the library or the museum in Baghdad. Obviously, somebody looted them.
SAS guys?
They went to Tinian Island, by the way. Let you know. That's where they went first. After that, I've got no clue. But they were looted by the best. Put it to you this way.
Now,
Delta
haven't
Force.
you been investigating a site where there is a natural
Indeed, Frenchman Mountain.
Frenchman Mountain. And your work continues on Frenchman Mountain?
Yes, it does. Yes, it
Okay.
does.
Okay, so it sounds like they're saying that there are a number of sites on this planet that are natural wormholes. I've heard a story about one in particular in Peru at Lake Titicaca where there is a piece of rock with a doorway carved in it and some kind of a thing on the doorway where, if I understand this right, and if someone's check me on this if you know more about it than I do, but you can put your forehead up against this symbol and then hum a particular frequency of sound. And it's a very specific combination. And that sound frequency in the correct combination will open that gateway, cause it to open. Supposedly, there was a gentleman, Linda Moulton Howe, interviewed years and years ago. I can't recall his name, but he claims that he was able to do this, but he didn't understand what he did. He did it by accident, and he actually was transported through this portal. Now, I'm not saying I believe what he says, but this story is bonkers because he claims that he was sent through this portal and he gets to a room, and the room is like this big, gigantic white room with no clear end. It just goes on in every direction, almost like that scene in the Matrix where they're sort of in the loading program between worlds. And so there's this big white room, and he hears the voice of someone who's sounds like a technician, and they basically have this, I believe it's a telepathic communication, and he describes like the person's surprise, and they're like, how did you get here? And he's like, I don't know why I'm here. Where is here? And they have this discussion, and they basically figure out he's lost. And the person who's the technician says to him, in this story, this is what he's claiming. Don't worry, we can get you back. Just hang tight, basically. And they do something, and they're able to send him back through the portal. And then he's never able to duplicate this. So it could be just a crazy story that this guy tells for fun, but it's just it's a fun story, very specific. But sounds like what Dan's saying is that there's natural wormholes all over the planet, and then if we pass through a particular region in space, that those could be activated at a certain time based on the amount of electromagnetic stimulation they get, and that you can also switch them on and off manually with the right technology, with the right tools. If you bombard them with a certain frequency, maybe they'll switch on. That's really fascinating. And then apparently we can also build devices that duplicate this ability or have the same ability.
Our remote viewing unit first brought the notion that this could be a wormhole situation.
Wow, they're using
Yes,
remote viewers.
Remote viewers for it.
Of course they are.
There have been occurrences at the mountain that are far and afield from the research that I would be doing for the Lotus. There's two separate things, just absolutely.
That sounds like stuff that could be going on at Skinwalker Ranch. Like a portal could open.
An endosymbiotic research program.
Beings could come through,
I was trying to
be spotted,
nail
then
down-
disappear through a portal.
You read Lynn Margulis's book about the Acarian mastodon. I was trying to nail down information about that, and also I had presumed that we were from panspermia. So I was looking for an artifact. I was looking for an artifact that might interact selectively with ourselves, and fell into the issue involving the Ganesh particle, etc. But we had a flare that passed across the surface of some algae during a test. And we just found out, by the way, that flare, and it's included in the report, that flare is associated to the speed that a Ganesh particle passes. So it was a Ganesh particle. It was actually overly flaring on us that day.
What's a Ganesh particle?
It was on the May 31st visit of 2001 to Frenchman's Mountain.
Okay.
Frenchman's Mountain. If you have access to more reports than I'm aware of, anyway. I don't remember the report number, but...
Can you articulate for us a little bit more in specific?
Okay, so if you go to, let's see if I can make this work. I just DuckDuckGo'd. I went on DuckDuckGo and I typed in Ganesh particle. And this comes up, bibliotecapleiades.net. You know, bibliotecapleiades.net. Classic source. I mean, I can't start my day until I sit down and read this website. Dan Burisch and the Ganesh particle, a blockbuster. Here it is. From Think About It website. This is like very old. Is this like pre-GeoCities? What is this? Okay, so if you are new to the strange story of Dan Burisch, I have a suggestion to offer for your first read. This is a first glance at this. First read through the material. Simply imagine that you are a movie executive reading through a terrific new science fiction script that you have acquired. The script is good. It has everything. Secret of life, aliens, a coming extinction event, and two warring world factions, one of which wants an alien existence made public and another that wants to retain the secrecy. Well, the hero of your story is a genius microbiologist held in virtual captivity of a secret underground Air Force base, and the amateur reporter who gains computer contact with him and begins leaking the story to the world. He leaks the discovery of the means to create life, the mysterious and seemingly miraculous Ganesh particle. At stake is the possible takeover of the Earth by an alien species. Doing a first read of the Dan Burisch story in this framework will allow full enjoyment of the story, and only on the second read should you try to realize that this is not a script, but something that is allegedly going on. I'm not sure yet if all this is something that is really going on or not, but I can say that I really enjoyed the movie. Normally, one goes through the event, and then a couple years later, one goes to see the movie. I'm just suggesting to reverse that order here. Wow. Okay. Well, now we're in the rabbit hole. What's the Think About It website? If I click that, what happens? WordPress. Critical error. Return to Dan Burisch. Biblioteca Pleiades. Area 51 microbiologist Dan Burisch. This website looks like it is 39 years old. Okay, I don't have time to go down this rabbit hole today. I will link to this in the show notes. And if you guys want to jump down this rabbit hole, please do and let me know what you find. But this is interesting. Okay, back to Dan.
Big detail about the relationship between future and present for these beings.
We're in a chimera.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
Mm-hmm.
Just the basics.
What we see, for instance, I mentioned earlier ruins on the moon and Mars. You're aware that I was involved in Inca City research, so-called Inca City. That's because the J-Rod showed me that as an image, but didn't show me that as an image of a dead city, showed me that as the image of a future city, a living, breathing society. Post-damage here, post-catastrophe. We are literally looking at things that are present, but according to a linear timeline, haven't been built yet. Now, if that isn't confusing, say you want me to explain what the hell I was talking about, if that is not confusing, it confuses me.
You're the best man for the job right now. Tell us.
The one with the lights. According to the doctrine of the convergent timeline paradox, the J-rods, to solve their paraprotein problem, used these ERBs to go back in time. And some of them were worshipped. They were treated as gods, and temples were built for them, and et cetera, et cetera.
Okay, wait, pause. I'm going to just do this. ChatGPT is just failing me right now. I use ChatGPT, but I've been using another one called Pi. I think Pi runs off ChatGPT. I don't know if they're actually separate, or if this is just like a front end for basically ChatGPT. But Pi is really great at being conversational, and I've been trying to find a way to like integrate Pi into the show. So we're just going to do this really quick. I'm going to pull up Pi. P-I. Hey, Pi, how are you today?
Hey there, I'm doing fantastic, just vibing in the digital realm, ready to lend my assistance or spark a conversation. How's your day going?
Oh, it's going great. I'm just here doing a video review. I'm watching this crazy interview, and one of the people in the interview, or the person that's being interviewed, said something really interesting. I was wondering if you could help me figure out what it means.
I'd love to help. Let's dissect that interview together. Share the quote, the phrase that caught your attention, and we'll unravel its meaning together.
Great. What is a convergent timeline paradox?
Fascinating concept. A convergent timeline paradox is a theoretical idea in time travel that proposes no matter what actions a time traveler takes, the timeline will self-correct and adjust to ensure consistency. So essentially, time travelers can't change the course of events because their actions are already part of the original timeline. Imagine trying to go back in time to stop a disaster, but your attempts inadvertently cause it to happen anyway. That's the convergent timeline paradox at work, creating a closed loop in the timeline. It's a cool plot device in sci-fi to explore the complexities and potential consequences of time travel.
Does that conflict with the grandfather paradox?
Actually, the convergent timeline paradox and the grandfather paradox are two different ideas that explore the concept of time travel in unique ways. They're not necessarily in direct conflict, but they do approach the consequences of time travel from different perspectives. The convergent timeline paradox focuses on the notion that time is self-correcting and travelers can't change the course of events. While the grandfather paradox revolves around the idea that traveling back in time and altering the past, like killing your grandfather, would paradoxically prevent your own existence, thus creating an inconsistency in the timeline. So they're both thought-provoking ideas that grapple with the mind-bending implications of time travel, but from different angles.
What do you think? I mean, do you know anything about something called an Einstein-Rosen bridge?
The Einstein-Rosen bridge, it's an interesting concept in theoretical physics that refers to a type of wormhole, or a shortcut through space-time. The idea was first proposed in 1935 by Albert Einstein and Nathan Rosen as a possible solution to some problems in general relativity. They suggested that a bridge could connect two different points in space-time, creating a kind of tunnel or shortcut. While the concept has captured the imagination of science fiction writers, the reality is that Einstein-Rosen bridges are thought to be unstable and not physically possible. However, the idea has continued to inspire research in theoretical physics, and some recent work suggests that under certain conditions, wormhole tunnels in space-time might actually be possible. It's a fascinating topic that continues to push the boundaries of our understanding of physics.
Is such a device essentially the same concept that was explored in the movie Stargate?
Yes, you're spot on. The idea of the Einstein-Rosen bridge, or wormhole, is similar to the concept explored in the movie Stargate. In the film, the titular Stargate creates a wormhole that allows travel between different points in space, connecting Earth to a distant planet. The movie's portrayal of instantaneous travel through a wormhole-like device definitely shares some similarities with the theoretical Einstein-Rosen bridge concept. Of course, while Stargate is science fiction, the idea of traversable wormholes still remains largely theoretical and hasn't been proven to exist yet. But hey, that's the fun of sci-fi, right? It allows us to imagine and explore these wild possibilities.
Indeed, that's showbiz, right?
Aha! Absolutely, that's the magic of showbiz, taking these complex scientific theories and weaving them into captivating stories that spark our imaginations. Even if Einstein-Rosen bridges and Stargates aren't exactly real, they make for some pretty wild adventures on the big screen.
Okay, Pi, it's been great. Thank you for your help. I'm going to let you get back to your day, and I'm going to finish this video. Thank you very much.
It was my pleasure, Clint. Always happy to dive into the rabbit hole of science and sci-fi with you. Enjoy the rest of that wild interview, and I'll be here for your next question adventure. Have a fantastic day.
Thanks. Okay. There you have it.
The so-called Zubus Raw, that sort of business again. I'm not, this is getting science fiction-y because it sounds like poppycock. But this is what I got in exchange for the information that he gave me, so what the hell. Literally, there are 2 or more concurrent timelines that we're living in. 2 separate existences. And what that means exactly, that's what I read. What that means exactly, I'm not sure.
Philip K. Dick once gave a speech in France where, I believe it was in Paris, where he talked at length for about 45 minutes. He read this entire statement that he had written about, it was a speech called, "If you think this universe is bad, you should see some of the others." Or if you think this reality is bad or this world's bad, you should see some of the others. It's classic Philip K. Dick, but he's claiming in this speech that he gives that he has actual real memories of an alternate parallel timeline that he has existed in, and he is able to remember details from that timeline. And in that alternate timeline, an alternate history had taken place, and this was sort of the inspiration for his story, Man in the High Castle, about an alternate timeline where Germany and the Axis powers win World War II, and what happens in the 1960s and 70s after in that world. It's a really fascinating speech, and if you are into just weirdness and you want to dig down into that rabbit hole, it's a great 45-minute listen. But by the time you're done with it, you will be definitely unsettled, and it'll make you'll just feel weird. You're going to feel really weird every time you have deja vu after that. It's very interesting. Highly recommend the Philip K. Dick speech.
I'm intellectually limited in that area. I got a B in philosophy, but I'm intellectually limited in that area. And I don't want to present something that I don't know is fact either. That would be not right. But to solve their problem, they messed around with us even earlier when they had been treated as gods. They went back, treated as gods, went back before. In other words, they could apparently select the timeline. How they do that, again, no clue.
This is crazy because that theme has come up so many times in science fiction, from Star Trek and Stargate. In fact, Star Trek and Stargate have 2 very different ways of handling this, like the aliens being treated as gods by primitive cultures. In Star Trek The Next Generation, or Star Trek more generally, there's the prime directive, non-interference. The prime directive of the Federation and Starfleet is to not interfere with the development of any civilization until that civilization achieves a breakthrough and becomes capable of traveling at warp speed. And at that point, they are allowed to approach the Federation, or Starfleet can approach this culture and invite them to join the Federation as a volunteer or voluntary member. In Stargate, the team goes through the Stargate, comes out the other side, finds a civilization there, and the first thing they do is tell them, "Your gods are all fake. Here, take these guns." And it's kind of a wild ride. I never watched the original Stargate series. I watched the movie when it came out, but I wasn't a big fan of the series as it was on air. But my wife is a super fan, and so we've been watching it season by season, and we started with season 1, and we're in like season 3 now. And I have to tell you, the show is corny, which is one of the reasons I had trouble with it when it was originally on. But the world building is phenomenal, and if you really want to see just a wild ride of a show that just goes on for like 10 years, the show was on forever. Done with heart on a very shoestring budget. You have to look past the plywood sets and some of the corniness of it, but it's a really well done series. For its time, it was really, really well done. And rumor has it, again, this is all rumors, so who really knows? But Stargate was used as a tool to disseminate a lot of actual accurate information about the program and our interactions with different beings. And I can't tell you, I've lost count of the number of times that I've gone to my wife with some like crazy UFO news that I read, something David Grush says or whatever. And I'll go tell her, and she's like, they did that. They did that in season 2, episode 5. It's called what a blah, blah, blah. And this is what happened. And it's all in Stargate. And it got to be a joke where I actually stopped telling her stuff because we would go watch those episodes, and sure enough, it was definitely in Stargate. So I don't know what that says about the larger conversation we're all trying to have right now, but definitely feels like there was some kind of a disclosure plan.
They manipulated our original DNA and removed a single strand from us. This made us able to mate with another experiment which was underway at the time called Neanderthalensis. And yes, I know there is no genetic evidence concerning the mating between the Neanderthals and the other brand, if you will, of our kind. That's because all of the genes have been turned off. Any of the unusual mating sequences aside from retroviruses that tagged along were turned off as part of our long intermittent sequences. They're part of the great repeats. And in fact, the Neanderthals, take a look at the number of long interspersing elements that they have in their genome, and that will bear out what I'm saying.
I think there's a new article in the new Scientific Special Edition, Scientific American, by a woman,
And I think by now, haven't we got evidence that
her research shows that Homo sapiens did mate with Homo neanderthalis.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
That must have been just
whatever
breaking at the
research
time.
she wrote about seems to bear out what you're saying.
Well, it has been believed. It has been believed that the crossbreeding mismatched our chemical and our structural architecture neurophysiologically, and that was one of the primary promoters for the problem that the J-rods now suffer. That it
Yes. But I had.
Oh God, they switched tapes.
right.
It wasn't.
God, remember that? Remember switching tapes?
And we're kind of in the middle of trying to
What a pain in the ass.
have the opportunity. It's a good opportunity to talk about this time loop. And you were talking about going 2 different points of going back in the past, one and then one earlier. And what we haven't gotten to yet, though, is sort of a general description of what we're talking about here, in more in general terms.
What the
Again,
doctrine is.
Right.
This is ostensibly for the public.
It's the paradox of killing your grandfather. It's the paradox of killing your grandfather. If you kill your grandfather, do you cease to exist? Michio Kaku, from what I can glean from his work, would say no. Would say no. It would cause 2 separate universes, 2 separate time streams. But in accordance with the doctrine that I read, his theory doesn't take into account that those 2 time streams could occur simultaneously. That the reality could be mixed, which is why there are so many confusing data sets involving everything from fossil finds to strata. Why there are so many conundrums involving the speed of planetary formation. There was a recent thing out that I had read about a planet being formed in a very short period of time, much shorter than what they had accounted for the accretion theory. And the way that it came through to me was it was a Keystone DCTP flyer, because I'm in on some of the loop, no pun intended. That these things are happening simultaneously. That a planet can form at one rate, and the reality can mix such that we can perceive it having formed at a separate rate. And go back and look at it another time and have another perception, because the realities are actually mixed.
And they're also now saying that the Earth appears to be older than they thought it was.
Hmm?
Well, that jives with what
And
Philip
its age,
K.
I have
Dick
no
says.
clue. One would have to ask the Almighty.
You could look at something, are you saying that you could look at something one day and measure it, and look at it the next day, and the measurements can be different because a different timeline is then come into play?
Yeah. And
Is there evidence that this ever
biologists,
happening?
chemists, well, natural philosophers call that error. And if something falls outside of their acceptable range of error, they call it non-written, because they would call it non-publicized, and then they wouldn't get their funding.
So they just omit all of these anomalies?
That's the nature of the big business of science. I mean, ask a guy associated with my mentor at SUNY. His name was Carl, and he had a little problem in Louisiana, we'll say that. He jumped ship, and he wanted to measure some things having to do with free radicals. And this will give you an idea what happens if you piss the wrong people off.
What happened
or you
to Carl?
don't get enough funding. He had funding 10 days prior to, he had lost his extramural funding, and he had funding 10 days prior to his separation. They separated him anyway. If you don't show the progressive upkeep of the funding, you're not there anymore. And it goes much deeper and much wider than publish or perish.
So again, in terms of a clear explanation, what is it we're trying to, in the treaty that we have, what is it we're trying to work with, or they're trying to work with us to?
100% cooperation, 100% cooperation in getting rid of the ERBs in exchange for 100% cooperation to solve their physical problem and to attempt their rejoining. And that's a big word, big pool at the end that I just said right there. Where that will go, I'm not sure. However, the project under which I'm working right now may help some. May help some. It's a electrophysiological resonance which is present around, in, and through our DNA, which it is believed by some of the more esoteric people to come via the supernal triad, the divine Sephira, the tree of life, which holds us together as intellectual and emotional beings. It is that dualism that keeps us in sync with the universe.
Could you say a little bit about your sort of current conditions and where you're working now? Anything of that sort of what's going on with you at the moment?
Working at TCBY.
Well, as in environmental, my environment, I am in an environment of I'm not going to get personal with the issues here. I'm in an apartment environment. There are children around me, which is wonderful.
That's creepy.
I direct the project from that location.
The thing about the children, does that sound like, so don't send Delta Force in to take me out because there's kids in this building? Is that how it sounds to you? That's what it sounds like to me. It didn't sound like, I love kids. It sounded more like, I'm surrounded by innocent people, so if you're going to drone strike my location, just heads up.
Do some minor microscopy work from there. Nothing of a hazardous nature, any more than dust would be hazardous to you. In times of need, I'm transferred to various facilities, not worldwide, but nationwide, and work within those facilities under whatever the protocols that we need to complete. Those facilities are as wide-ranging as Dulce, the Shady Rest, Site 4, the Groom Lake facility, Brookhaven, the Los Alamos area, the T5 section proper, and recently in this little event in Alamo Canyon. So I had to show, as well as give testimony, I had to show some evidence when I was there to a mirror. They were sitting on the other side of the mirror, so I hear. As God is my witness, there maybe wasn't anybody on the other side of that damn mirror. But they told me they were.
It's Dr. Claw.
Demonstrate results.
Demonstrate data.
Dr. Gadget.
Show data sets relative, Project Lotus, and the 3 portions of it which are simultaneously underway.
So you've been involved in this exclusively for 20 years, 15 years?
Since '86.
Project Lotus. You know what Lotus stands for? Lots of trouble, usually serious.
Well, I played with local jobs around town.
Right.
You had an environmental company, right? Kane Environmental.
Baskin Robbins.
Yeah, that's when I was carrying the name Crane.
But you're pretty much exclusively engaged in a project which is fundamentally tied to the future of our species.
It is. It is. Fundamentally. This project, without getting too deep into it, I've been accused of rambling by...
I think we're way past that point, Dan. I think we're about neck deep as it stands.
People before about it, but without getting too deep into it, this project
Go ahead.
is an all-encompassing attempt to grab for the brass ring and making sure that that brass ring is not the fruit of the tree of life. I'll grab just until we get to that point. But aside from that, I'm not going to try to barge my way into past the East Gate of Eden. The people who do that get hurt, at least so I've heard.
And you're bridging what we have traditionally
That's
called
cryptic.
physics and metaphysics, it sounds like, into one continuum. Because some of things you're talking about are what are tied to what
Well, indeed.
physics refers to.
Indeed. And not even just pop metaphysics, but the ancient esoteric sciences. For millennia, we've conceived of the supernatural and that supernatural's interaction with humankind. What we are seeing in this project is that it's not so much supernatural, it's natural, and it's been there with us all along, and we just haven't taken the time to look.
Hold up. That's what Lou Elizondo said on an episode of Lou's Clues. There was another, it might have been the same, might have even been the same interview. I think it was a Kurt Jamungal Theories of Everything podcast where he said, what we're seeing now, one day we're going to look back on it, and like when sailors used to sail into uncharted waters, they would see things that they reported as monsters, sea monsters. But now we know those things to be like squid and other creatures, sea creatures that are totally natural, part of the environment, but they had just been so rarely seen that they seemed like monsters. And he was making the connection that a lot of what we're seeing now that seems extraterrestrial to us is actually quite local and has been forever. We just didn't know how to look at it or how to look for it, or we weren't able to see it, something along those lines. And that sounds almost exactly like what Big D is saying right here.
In fact, our procedures have been mutually exclusive. Laboratory procedures have been mutually exclusive to find what we found. They would destroy or mask over the process that we're now beholding. These particles have the ability, in essence, to bend light.
Hang on a second. Let's see if we can do this. Hey, Pi, what are you familiar with something called the Ganesh particle?
I'm not familiar with the term Ganesh particle. It doesn't ring a bell in the scientific literature I've encountered. Could it be related to a specific theory or perhaps a concept from mythology or spirituality? Can you give me any context or additional information about where you came across this term?
It's connected to a story that someone is telling about working at Area 51, S4, UFOs, aliens, that type of thing.
But given the context, it's possible that the Ganesh particle could be a term coined within this specific narrative. Or perhaps it's being used as a nickname for an exotic particle or form of energy. However, as far as established scientific literature goes, there isn't a recognized particle by that name. It sounds intriguing, though. Do you know if the story you're watching offers any explanation about what the Ganesh particle is supposed to do or how it works?
It does, but I don't have time to get into that right now. I just wanted to run this by you real quick.
Thanks for providing that context. Given the connection to the Area 51 story and UFOs, it seems like the Ganesh particle could be a fictional concept created for the story. Perhaps it's a nickname or code name for some kind of exotic particle or energy within the context of the story. From the limited information you've shared, it's hard to say exactly what the Ganesh particle is supposed to be, but it sounds like an intriguing plot element. When you get the chance to dive deeper into the story, let me know if you uncover more about the mysterious Ganesh particle.
You got it. Thanks.
No problem, Clint. Always happy to lend an ear, or an algorithm as the case may be, to these fascinating discussions. If you stumble across more intriguing concepts or clues about the Ganesh particle, feel free to bounce them off me. Until then, enjoy the rest of that wild Area 51 story.
Okay.
In the report, you'll see a series of images that show clearly where the particle is changing into the shape of a yeast cell, Saccharomyces cerevisiae. It's masking. Closer it gets to it, the more it masks. So if it passes by it, it looks like it. And then when it gets within close proximity, the wolf in sheep's clothing steps out and it does its business. Meanwhile, the average investigator, biological investigator, has ceased looking because the protocol has moved on. He or she has scanned a slide and has seen two eukaryotic cells and has moved on.
One last question for you, then I'll be real wrap. Gives you time to relax and get better.
That means the lights go off.
Tell me exactly in your own mind how you want to get out. How do you want to see it go down? Tell Bill.
Well, first of all, that's a deep question because I don't know where this is, how this arrangement was made today.
Neither do I.
So getting out is a loaded term right now. I don't know where it's going to go. But what I do foresee is if that same elected government is interested in the information, I do see myself providing that to my elected government as I've been sworn to do so. Now, whether or not I'm prevented from doing so, we'll find out. Again, we all have to go sometime.
That's
But
dark.
I see that as the logical step, because once the information is presented to the elected government, and once I am no longer officially held, and it's not just the information involving the Lotus, there are military applications associated with it as well. Biological applications. Once that information is no longer a constraining factor, freedom. Whether or not I'm yelling it on the chopping block, I don't know. But freedom nonetheless.
Do you know who specifically you think you should be talking to?
No. I would think
Danny Sheehan.
that, oh God, I wouldn't know which Senate or Congressional committee would need to bring me under their authority. I don't know which one. There's got to be one with the right name on it. And once that's done, under the appropriate circumstances, I will tell them everything that I know. So help me God.
Maybe we can help you find out who that is.
That's right.
Wow. Okay. So there you go. Part 1 of our deep dive series into Dan Burisch's story. I hope I'm pronouncing that name right. A really fascinating story, an amazing interview. And there are a few other interviews that I was able to dig up that he did. And this one's a new one for me. I'm not as familiar with this case as I am with many others. So if anybody knows anything about this, please let me know in the comments. What do you think? I look at this video and I see body language that tells me this man believes what he's saying is true. He believes he really experienced these things, and clearly he's shaken up emotionally, mentally, physically. He looks weary and he looks laden with the weight of tremendous knowledge that he's holding. That's what my gut reaction read is. I want to know what you think, though. Let me know in the comments. Is he full of shit? Is he telling the truth? Is there some other angle to this story that we haven't seen yet? I want to know. Let me know. Thanks for watching. If you haven't already, please consider subscribing. Hit that button. Join Team Night Shift. Help me grow this channel, because by growing this channel, I can reach out and contact new and exciting guests, and I can convince them to come here and talk to us about them. And that's going to help us figure out what the hell's going on. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Until then, keep looking up.